Human education is a quaint relic of a primitive species, the Galithian chancellor sneered, her words dripping with disdain. Your so-called curriculum might entertain hatchlings, but it has no place in a serious galactic institution. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Hundreds of alien delegates, their vibrant and varied forms seated in the grand assembly hall of the Galactic Cultural Exchange, glanced at the human contingent with a mix of curiosity and pity. The humans, outnumbered and outwardly calm, sat in quiet defiance. Dr. Aisha Grant, Earth's leading education envoy, leaned forward, her sharp green eyes locking onto the Chancellor. A slight smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, not one of amusement, but of restrained resolve. Chancellor Varleth, she began, her tone steady, education isn't about entertaining hatchlings. It's about preparing minds to solve problems, adapt to the unknown, and create solutions where none exist. If your academy dismisses these principles as primitive, then perhaps the issue lies not with us, but with you. Gasps rippled through the assembly. A six-limbed Delvarian ambassador leaned closer to his neighbor, his mandibles clicking in shock. Rarely did anyone speak to a Galithian chancellor with such candor. Varleth's antennae twitched, a sign of irritation. You dare to suggest that Galithian education, an institution that has shaped minds for millennia, is flawed? Her voice was cold, calculated. Your Earth-centric hubris is astounding. Not flawed, Aisha corrected. Just incomplete. The tension in the room thickened. Aisha's colleague, Colonel David Malik, a former military strategist, shifted uneasily beside her. You're playing with fire, Aisha, he murmured under his breath. She ignored him. Perhaps we can settle this in a way that's both fair and enlightening, Aisha said, addressing the room at large. Let us put your academy's students to the test. Varleth's laugh was a sharp, buzzing sound that echoed through the chamber. A test? Surely you jest. What could a test from Earth possibly prove to minds who have mastered the intricacies of quantum calculus before their second molt? It's not about what you've mastered, Aisha replied. It's about how you think. We'll send over an entry-level human test. One of the simplest we give to our students, nothing advanced, nothing culturally biased. Let your brightest students take it. If they pass, we'll concede that Earth's curriculum lacks value for your academy. And if they fail? Varleth asked, her mandibles clicking in amusement. Then you agree to include Earth's curriculum in your academy's offerings, Aisha said. Her voice was firm, her gaze unwavering. Murmurs spread through the assembly like wildfire. A broad-shouldered Thryn diplomat, his scales glinting under the chamber's lights, spoke up. This could be entertaining. Another voice chimed in, belonging to a pale, ethereal Trazari delegate. Or humiliating. For one side, at least. Varleth tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. Very well, Dr. Grant. I accept your wager. But understand this, when your test inevitably fails to challenge us, the reputation of Earth's education system will be reduced to a galactic joke. That's a risk we're willing to take, Aisha said, her calm demeanor concealing the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As the assembly adjourned, Aisha and her team filed out of the chamber, their faces a mixture of determination and trepidation. Malik caught up to her in the corridor. Do you really think this will work? It's not about winning, David, Aisha said, her voice softer now. It's about showing them that our way of thinking has value. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see that there's more to intelligence than raw knowledge. Behind them, the murmur of alien voices continued, and in the distance, the Galithian chancellor watched, her antennae twitching with curiosity and a flicker of doubt. This is the human test? Chancellor Varleth's voice crackled through the Academy's grand lecture hall, her disbelief cutting like a blade. It looks rudimentary. Before her lay the holographic projection of Earth's so-called entry-level test. Rows of alien scholars, educators, and students filled the room, their brightly colored garments reflecting the prismatic lights of the Academy's crystalline architecture. The test had been distributed that morning, causing an uproar of confusion and derision. Varleth's second-in-command, a stoic advisor named Krenth, stepped closer to the projection. His elongated fingers hovered over the shimmering display. "It appears to be incomplete," he said hesitantly. "It's not incomplete," Vrelith muttered under her breath. The young Galithian student sat near the back, her slender frame dwarfed by the towering forms of her peers. She tapped her quills nervously on her data pad, her gaze darting between the test and the crowd's reaction. The questions were simple, or so they appeared. Identify the pattern and complete the sequence. 2, 4, 8, 16, ____. Explain the ethical dilemma presented in the following scenario. A short narrative followed, detailing a stranded group of travelers with limited resources. Using only the materials listed, construct a device capable of transporting liquid without spilling. Vrelith had reviewed the questions several times, but the answers eluded her. The patterns didn't follow the rigid mathematical logic she'd been trained to recognize. The ethical dilemma required empathy and imagination, concepts barely touched on in her studies. The final question seemed absurd. Why would anyone construct something without explicit schematics? Humans enjoy riddles, Krinth offered diplomatically. Perhaps this is cultural posturing. Posturing or not, Vrelith snapped, our academy's reputation is on the line. If this test is so easy, then why have none of our students solved it yet? A murmur spread through the room. The truth was undeniable. Since the test had been distributed, no student, not even those at the top of their classes, had completed a single question. The responses submitted were either laughably overcomplicated or painfully incorrect. The pattern question is nonsense, one student declared. There's no explanation for the numbers doubling. It's arbitrary. The ethical scenario, another chimed in, assumes individuals would sacrifice their own interests for the group. That's illogical. It's a trap, hissed a third. The humans are mocking us. Vrelith's mandibles clicked in irritation. Enough, she said, her voice echoing through the hall. This is not a test of intellect but of endurance. Humans are cunning, always looking for ways to exploit weaknesses. They think this will embarrass us. But Chancellor, Krinth interjected cautiously, perhaps it is we who fail to understand their intent. If the test is so simple, why would they risk exposing it? Surely, they know the stakes. Vrelith turned to him sharply. Are you suggesting that our academy, the pinnacle of galactic knowledge, is incapable of understanding this child's play? Krinth hesitated, but before he could respond, a voice cut through the tension. It's not about intelligence, Vrelith said, her voice unsteady but loud enough to silence the room. All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of their stares, but pressed on. The test isn't asking for what we know, it's asking how we think. Humans value adaptability, creativity, and emotional reasoning. Those are things we're not trained for. Ridiculous, Vrelith hissed. You're saying that the very foundation of our education system is flawed? I'm saying it's incomplete, Vrelith replied, echoing Aisha Grant's words. The room erupted into chaos, voices arguing for and against the possibility. Vrelith shrank back, her courage faltering under the scrutiny. But her words lingered, taking root in the minds of a few. Later that evening, in the Chancellor's private chambers, Vrelith paced before a holographic screen displaying Earth's test. Krinth stood silently nearby. Run another analysis, Vrelith ordered. Cross-reference it with every known algorithm, every logic pattern we've ever documented. We will solve this. As Krinth left to execute her command, Vrelith stared at the screen. The questions taunted her, each one a reminder that, for the first time in centuries, her academy faced a challenge it couldn't overcome. In the shadows of her dormitory, Vrelith stared at the test on her data pad. Unlike her peers, she wasn't trying to decode it with formulas or brute force. Instead, she imagined herself in the scenarios, asking questions she'd never considered before. What if the answers weren't about being right, but about understanding why they mattered? A faint smile touched her lips as she picked up her stylus and began to write. Unprecedented failure. The words echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Chancellor Vrelith stood rigid before the gathered council of senior Galithian educators. Her usually composed demeanor was cracking, a faint quiver in her antennae betraying her frustration. The council hall, carved from translucent stone and glowing faintly in shades of green, seemed to amplify the tension in the room. Surrounding her were the most brilliant minds of the Galithian Academy, yet none had been able to solve what the humans called their simplest test. "We've analyzed the test from every angle," Krinth reported, his voice measured but grim. "Mathematical algorithms fail to decipher the patterns. Ethical evaluators find the moral dilemma indeterminate. And as for the final task, no one understands why the materials list is incomplete. It's unacceptable," Varlath snapped, cutting him off. "Do you realize what this could mean for our reputation? For millennia, the Academy has been the pinnacle of galactic education. And now we are floundering because of a human riddle." Krinth hesitated before speaking. "Perhaps we need to rethink our approach. It may not be a riddle, but rather a paradigm." Varlath rounded on him, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. "And what does that mean?" "Humans think differently," Krinth said, choosing his words carefully. "They value traits like creativity, adaptability, and intuition. These are qualities we've overlooked in our pursuit of logical perfection. The test may be designed to measure those attributes." A ripple of discontent passed through the council. One elder, her translucent wings twitching with irritation, spoke up. "Are you suggesting we reshape our education system to mimic Earth's? That would be an insult to our history." "I'm suggesting we learn from this experience," Krinth countered, his voice firm. "If we cannot pass their test, what does that say about us?" The room descended into murmurs, arguments breaking out among the council members. Varlath raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough," she said coldly. "This is a distraction. The humans are toying with us, and we will not play into their hands. We will solve this test, and when we do, we will prove our superiority once and for all." In the Academy's student quarters, Vrillith sat hunched over her data pad, her quills twitching nervously. Around her, the dormitory buzzed with frantic activity as students debated the test. "I've tried every sequence," one student groaned, slamming his fist on the table. "There's no logic to it." "The moral question is impossible," another added. "Why would anyone sacrifice their resources for others? It's irrational." Vrillith said nothing, but her mind raced. She had spent hours poring over the questions, not trying to solve them in the traditional sense, but trying to understand them. The humans had designed these questions for a reason. What was she missing? The ethical scenario replayed in her mind, a group stranded on a barren world, their supplies dwindling. Who should eat, and who should go hungry? The answer wasn't about survival, it was about perspective. Humans valued empathy, cooperation, and the ability to make hard choices. "What if it's not about being right?" she muttered to herself. "What are you talking about?" a fellow student asked, overhearing her. Vrillith hesitated, then straightened. "The humans aren't testing what we know. They're testing how we think. They want to see if we can adapt, if we can understand something outside our own experiences." Her words drew skeptical stares. "You're saying they're testing us on feelings?" "Not just feelings," Vrillith said, growing more confident. "On creativity, intuition, and the ability to think beyond our rigid frameworks. That's why we're failing. We're trying to solve the test like it's a puzzle, but it's not, it's a reflection of who we are." Her peers fell silent, some looking intrigued, others dismissive. Meanwhile, in her private quarters, Varlath stared at the test on her screen. She hated how it taunted her. A simple pattern, an ethical scenario, a creative challenge, none of it should be this difficult. "Chancellor," Krintha's voice came through the intercom, "I have received another message from the human delegation. Dr. Grant has offered to demonstrate how the test is solved." Varlath bristled. "A demonstration? How generous of her." "Perhaps it's worth considering," Krantz suggested. "If nothing else, we might learn something." "I don't need a human to teach me," Varlath growled. But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her mind. For the first time in her career, she was facing an obstacle she couldn't overcome. And the thought of admitting that to the humans was almost unbearable. Back in the dormitory, Vrillith stared at her completed answers. They weren't perfect, but they felt right. Taking a deep breath, she submitted her responses. As her datapad chimed with confirmation, she whispered to herself, "Let's see what they think of this." The lecture hall was packed to capacity, the tension palpable as beings from across the galaxy assembled to witness the humans' demonstration. For the first time in Galithian Academy's storied history, its towering halls felt less like a sanctuary of knowledge and more like a courtroom. Dr. Aisha Grant stood at the center of the amphitheater, flanked by a projection of Earth's infamous test. Her confident demeanor remained steady under the scrutinizing gazes of thousands of alien scholars, students, and dignitaries. The Galithian Chancellor, Varlith, sat on a raised platform, her multifaceted eyes locked on Aisha with cold intensity. "You've gathered us here to flaunt your test," Varlith began, her voice echoing in the vast space. "I trust you'll explain why it has confounded even our brightest minds." Aisha allowed herself a small smile. "I'm not here to flaunt anything, Chancellor. I'm here to demonstrate that intelligence is more than the mastery of knowledge, it's the ability to think differently, to adapt, and to collaborate." Her words were met with skeptical murmurs. Beside her, a small group of human children, no older than 12, stood ready. Their bright eyes scanned the sea of alien faces, seemingly unfazed by the magnitude of the moment. "Let's begin," Aisha said, activating the first question, "identify the pattern and complete the sequence. 2, 4, 8, 16, _____." The room erupted into derisive laughter. A towering THRYNN delegate leaned over to his neighbor, scales glinting in the artificial light. "Surely this is a joke. The sequence doubles. Any child can see that." Aisha gestured to one of the human students, a freckled girl named Sophie. "Go ahead," she said. Sophie stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "The answer is 32, but that's not the point of the question. The pattern isn't just about doubling numbers, it's about recognizing how patterns work in context. If the sequence were based on a geometric progression or a cultural rule, the answer might differ. It's about asking why the pattern exists, not just solving it." The audience stilled, the laughter dying as confusion set in. "Why?" someone muttered. "Humans question everything," Aisha explained. "We don't just look for answers, we look for meaning." The second question appeared, explain the ethical dilemma presented in the scenario of the stranded travelers. A Galithian professor, bold enough to interject, sneered. "This question is designed to be unsolvable. No logical solution exists where resources are insufficient for survival." "Exactly," Aisha replied, turning to a boy named Marcus. Marcus addressed the room with an earnestness that belied his age. "There isn't a perfect solution. The question is meant to explore how we make decisions when every option has consequences. Do we prioritize the strongest? The weakest? Do we vote? It's about understanding the value systems behind the choices, not picking a right answer." The professor fell silent, the implications settling over the room like a heavy fog. "Humans thrive in uncertainty," Aisha continued. "Where you see chaos, we see opportunity. Where you demand definitive answers, we explore possibilities." Finally, the third question illuminated the room. Using only the materials listed, construct a device capable of transporting liquid without spilling. The audience leaned forward, anticipating the impossible. The materials were sparse: string, a small sheet of fabric, and a handful of simple tools. Aisha gestured to Sophie and Marcus. Within minutes, the children worked together, using the fabric to fashion a pouch, reinforcing it with string for strength, and using a stick as a stabilizing handle. They explained their reasoning as they worked, showcasing creativity and teamwork. When the device was complete, they demonstrated its effectiveness, transporting a small amount of liquid across the platform without spilling a drop. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even Varlatha's antennae twitched in surprise. "These questions," Aisha said, addressing the room, "aren't about demonstrating what we know. They're about how we think. Humans value curiosity, creativity, and collaboration. Our strength lies in our adaptability, qualities that are just as important as logic and knowledge." Varlatha's mandibles clicked rhythmically, a telltale sign of frustration. And you believe this is the pinnacle of education? Emotion? Instinct? No, Aisha replied firmly. It's balance. Logic and emotion. Knowledge and intuition. Structure and creativity. That's what our curriculum teaches, and that's what makes us different. As the demonstration ended, murmurs of awe and confusion filled the hall. The Galician chancellor rose slowly, her expression unreadable. You have made your point, Dr. Grant, she said, her voice cold but tinged with something akin to respect. But this does not mean we will accept your methods. Not yet. Aisha nodded, knowing that this was only the beginning. In the shadows of the audience, Vrelith watched intently, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, she began to understand. You passed it? The whisper echoed through the dormitory like a thunderclap. Vrelith's peers, still dazed from the human's demonstration, turned to face her in disbelief. She stood in the corner, clutching her data pad as if it might betray her secret. Her quills quivered under the weight of their stares. I think I did, she said softly. You think? One student sneered, his mandibles clicking in mockery. Either you did, or you didn't. It's not that simple, Vrelith replied, her voice growing firmer. This test wasn't about finding the right answer, it was about understanding the question. That's what the humans were trying to show us. Her words hung in the air, met with skepticism and quiet murmurs. A tall student, her iridescent wings shimmering faintly, folded her arms. If you're so confident, prove it. What did you write? Vrelith hesitated, then held her data pad up. The projection of her answers hovered in the air, a faint glow illuminating the room. For the ethical dilemma, she had written. The decision should be made collectively, prioritizing those who can best ensure the group's survival while considering the emotional toll on all members. No choice is perfect, but empathy must guide the process. For the creative task, she had included a sketch of a liquid transport device, along with an explanation of its practicality and adaptability to varying conditions. Her peers studied the responses in silence. Slowly, the mocking expressions faded, replaced by something akin to grudging respect. You actually thought about it, one of them admitted, their voice tinged with surprise. I tried to think like they do, Vrelith said, her confidence growing. They don't look at problems the way we do. They ask questions we wouldn't even consider. Meanwhile, in Chancellor Varlath's private chambers, the mood was far less forgiving. The Council of Senior Educators had convened in an emergency session, their voices raised in heated debate. This is unacceptable, one elder growled, his voice resonating like a low hum. Our students are being humiliated, and now a human child builds a device with scraps in front of the entire galaxy? Perhaps it's time we accept the possibility, Krenth interjected cautiously. Their methods are different, yes, but not without merit. Vrelith's success proves that even our students can adapt if given the chance. Varlath turned on him sharply, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. You speak as though we should abandon centuries of tradition and bow to their primitive ways. It's not about abandoning tradition, Krenth said, holding her gaze. It's about evolving. We pride ourselves on being the pinnacle of galactic knowledge, yet here we are, unable to pass a simple test designed for humans. A heavy silence settled over the room. Varlath's mandibles clicked rhythmically as she considered his words. Finally, she spoke. Very well. If you believe this warrants further study, then let us see if this so-called human curriculum can withstand scrutiny. I propose a trial. Krenth tilted his head. A trial, Chancellor? Yes, she said. We will integrate a small portion of Earth's methods into one of our classrooms. If it proves effective, we will consider further implementation. But if it fails... She let the threat hang in the air. Back in the dormitory, Vrelith sat alone, her data pad glowing faintly. She had been summoned to the Chancellor's office for a meeting, an honor that both terrified and exhilarated her. As she reviewed her notes, her thoughts drifted back to the humans' demonstration. Sophie and Marcus hadn't seemed afraid, even with the eyes of the galaxy on them. They had approached each question with curiosity and confidence, unafraid to fail. Was that the secret? Not fearing failure? A chime interrupted her thoughts. It was time. Vrillith entered the Chancellor's chambers, her heart pounding. Varlith stood at the far end, flanked by Krenth and two other senior educators. Varlith began, her voice cold and formal. You are the first student to submit a complete set of answers to the human test. Your responses, while unconventional, demonstrate potential. Vrillith swallowed hard, unsure whether to feel relieved or apprehensive. We are implementing a trial program, Varlith continued. You will be part of it. For the next cycle, you will study under human educators, learning their methods and philosophies. You will report directly to us on your findings. The room spun for a moment as Vrillith processed the words. You want me to learn from them? Yes, Varlith said. But make no mistake, this is not an honor. This is a responsibility. You will prove whether their methods are worth our time. Vrillith nodded, determination settling over her like a second skin. I won't let you down. As she left the chambers, the weight of her task settled on her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was stepping into the unknown, guided not by logic or tradition, but by something far more human, hope. The lecture hall buzzed with energy as the first session of the trial program began. Aliens of every shape and size filled the room, their eyes fixed on the human instructors at the front. For many, this was more than a class, it was a revolution. Vrillith sat near the front, clutching her data pad nervously. She could feel the weight of the Academy's expectations on her shoulders, but she also felt something she hadn't experienced before, excitement. Dr. Aisha Grant stood confidently before the crowd, accompanied by a team of human educators. Unlike the stoic, formal demeanor of the Galithian instructors, the humans exuded an approachable energy. Their attire was simple, their movements fluid, and their expressions alive with warmth. Welcome to the first hybrid curriculum session, Aisha began, her voice calm yet commanding. This program is not about replacing your traditions. It's about expanding them. We're here to explore new ways of thinking, solving problems, and understanding the universe together. She turned to the holographic display and activated the first exercise. The room dimmed, and a simulation sprang to life, a damaged starship adrift in space. The crew, simulated holograms of various species, were running out of oxygen. The scenario is simple, Aisha said. Your task is to save as many lives as possible using the resources on board. But remember, there's no single solution. Vrillith's quills twitched as she studied the simulation. She immediately began analyzing the resources, a limited oxygen supply, a damaged life support system, and a malfunctioning navigation console. Beside her, her peers debated furiously, each proposing intricate, theoretical solutions. One student suggested rerouting power from the engines to life support. Another proposed prioritizing the crew with specialized skills. Yet none seemed satisfied with their answers. Stop overcomplicating it, Vrillith said suddenly, surprising even herself. The others turned to her, their eyes narrowing. And what would you suggest? One asked, his tone skeptical. Think about the crew as individuals, she said. Who can make the repairs? Who can keep the others calm? We don't need a perfect solution, we need one that works right now. Her peers fell silent as they considered her words. Slowly, they began adjusting their approach, focusing on the immediate needs of the crew rather than theoretical perfection. In the observation chamber above, Chancellor Varlith watched with Krenth and several senior educators. The simulation had been running for 20 minutes, and the changes in the students were already apparent. They're collaborating, one elder said, his voice tinged with disbelief. More than that, Krenth added. They're adapting. They're thinking outside the rigid frameworks we've imposed on them. Varlith remained silent, her multifaceted eyes fixed on Vrillith. The young student's approach was unconventional, yet it was yielding results. Perhaps there is merit in their methods, she said finally, her tone reluctant. Krenth allowed himself a small smile. I believe this is only the beginning. As the session progressed, the human instructors introduced more exercises, each designed to challenge creativity, empathy, and adaptability. By the end of the day, the students were visibly transformed. They spoke with more confidence, collaborated with ease, and began questioning the very foundations of their education. Vrelith found herself at the center of it all. Her insights and willingness to embrace the human methods had earned her respect among her peers, and even the instructors took notice. "You're doing well," Aisha said to her after class. Vrelith looked up, surprised. "I'm just trying to learn." "That's what makes you stand out," Aisha replied with a smile. "You're not afraid to think differently, and that's exactly what this galaxy needs." Weeks turned into cycles, and the trial program began yielding undeniable results. The students who participated in the hybrid curriculum consistently outperformed their peers in simulations and real-world applications. The program's success sparked a wave of interest across the galaxy, with other academies petitioning to adopt Earth's methods. The final turning point came during a public demonstration. Vrelith, now confident in her abilities, led a team of students through a complex rescue simulation. Using a mix of logic, creativity, and empathy, they succeeded where previous teams had failed. The audience erupted in applause, and even Chancellor Varlith stood to acknowledge their achievement. That evening, Varlith convened the council to make a historic announcement. "We began this journey with skepticism," she said, her voice firm but tempered with humility. "We questioned whether humanity's methods could teach us anything of value. Today, I stand corrected. Their approach has shown us not only how to think differently but also how to grow. Effective immediately, Earth's curriculum will be integrated into our academy." Cheers erupted from the council chamber, and across the galaxy, news of the decision spread like wildfire. For Vrelith, it was a moment of pride and reflection. Standing with Aisha and the human instructors, she felt a sense of belonging she'd never known. "You've changed us," she said quietly. Aisha smiled. "And you've reminded us why we teach." As they watched the stars outside the academy's crystalline walls, Vrelith couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning, not just for her, but for the galaxy. The Galactic Cultural Exchange Summit was in full swing, but this year, the atmosphere was different. Where once the room had been filled with arrogance and skepticism, now there was curiosity and collaboration. Dr. Aisha Grant stood at the podium, addressing a crowd of delegates from across the galaxy. Behind her, holographic projections displayed images of classrooms where human and alien students worked together, their varied perspectives sparking solutions that no single species could have achieved alone. "Education," Aisha began, "isn't about proving one species is superior to another. It's about unlocking the potential within all of us by embracing the diversity of thought, experience, and imagination. Together, we're creating something far greater than any of us could have done alone." The crowd erupted into applause. Among them sat Vrelith, now an ambassador for the hybrid curriculum. Her quills gleamed under the lights as she joined in the applause, pride swelling in her chest. The transformation had been swift and profound. Across the galaxy, academies once rooted in rigid traditions began integrating Earth's curriculum. Human instructors were in high demand, their approaches sparking innovation and growth in ways no one had anticipated. On Galithia, Vrelith had become a symbol of this change. Her journey from skeptical student to advocate for human methods inspired a new generation of learners. Her peers, once resistant to the unfamiliar, now embraced it with enthusiasm. The Galithian Chancellor, Varlith, had also undergone a quiet transformation. Though she maintained her stoic demeanor, there was a new glint in her eyes, a recognition that true strength lay not in clinging to the past, but in adapting to the future. In a quiet moment after the summit, Aisha found Vrelith standing on a balcony overlooking the sprawling galactic capital. "Thinking about what's next?" Aisha asked, stepping beside her. Vrelith nodded. "There's so much more to learn. So much we don't know about each other, about ourselves." "That's the beauty of it," Aisha said with a smile. "The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is left to discover." Vrelith turned to her, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Do you think we'll ever give you a test that you humans can't solve?" Aisha laughed. "I hope so. Because that's when we'll all grow the most." As the stars twinkled in the vast expanse above, the seeds of a new era had been planted. No longer would education be a measure of superiority, it would be a bridge, connecting species across the galaxy, fostering understanding, and unlocking the potential for a future where differences became strengths. For humanity, it was more than a victory. It was proof that their way of thinking, their ability to question, to imagine, and to adapt, could inspire even the most advanced civilizations. And for the galaxy, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. How you find today's story? Kindly subscribe the bell icon so that you can stay activated with more thrilling stories, and share in comment section your thoughts and areas where we can work on improvement. Thanks.